Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to part 2 of this special program of Real Talk, which is an extended program today because I've got this amazing guest with me who is the Police and Crime Commissioner for West Yorkshire. And if you missed the first part, the Police and Crime Commissioner plays a very, very important role in how policing is undertaken in the county of West Yorkshire. And there are 43 Police and Crime Commissioners across the country, and they all have this vital role about policing in communities. And although ostensibly we say policing by consent in this country, and we know that by and large that is the way policing operates, it's people like Alison, my guest, who try and make sure that that philosophy, that ideology is part central to the way communities are policed. And obviously people want to see their police be there to provide protection for them, but also respect and value those people who live within those counties as well. Now, we've been talking about the incident that happened in Hare Hills. Fortunately, things did calm down within a day or so. But one of the things that happened on social media, there were lots of people who used that as an opportunity to vilify certain communities at that time. And one of them was the Muslim community. And that was something that was really of concern to many, many people. We've seen that with politicians like Les Anderson making certain comments even at that time, but even now, particularly after the Manchester incident. So I'll talk to, and as before when we went for the break, I talked about Alison's other role was as the PCC. There's an association of police and crime commissioners, and several PCCs have different sort of expertise in different areas, and they lead on those areas. And Alison, whom as I say I've known for many, many years, is the Association of Police Crime Commissioners lead on equality and diversity. And as I said, I cannot think of anybody else who would be better at that particular role than Alison herself. Alison will come back to that. But at the time of the incident in Leeds, the Muslim community came in for quite a bit of a stick.
Yes, absolutely,
right?
they did.
And what did you see in the reflection of the Muslim community, the way they behaved at that time when these incidents were taking place?
Well, obviously, the Muslim community and the Roma community.
There was a Muslim councillor as well, wasn't there?
Yeah. Well, there were two. There were two very active Muslim councillors. In fact, I think all three of them were there, but the two we saw a lot on social media, with the Green and Councillor Salma Arith and Councillor Botin Ali. They were the two we saw. They were part of the peacekeeping force. They said to the police, "You go, wait outside." So the police were a couple of streets away.
So they didn't run away, as some people say on social media.
No, they didn't run away. They were waiting a couple of streets away.
They did that to calm things down.
They did that because they had become the source of the
friction.
of the friction, whatever it was. They had the helicopter. They had drones, so they could see everything all the time. And then local people, the Muslim local people, some of the Roma local people, they did their thing, and they tried to quieten down the community, many of whom were not involved, many of whom were standing on the outside looking in, many of them stayed in their homes, they didn't want to get involved, but those people who were getting involved, they were stopped by their own local people, and that's what a community is. The community stands up and defends itself, and also they recognise that the impact of some of the people who were doing the things that they shouldn't have been doing was going to be really long lasting. They knew that the police would end up finding out who they were, that they would get arrested, probably some of them will go to prison, and they didn't want that for their own community, so they stood up, they stepped in and they saved their community. But they did it together as a community, so many people were involved in that.
So I'm sure this is as a result of what you said earlier, that you'd built this resilience working with those communities.
Absolutely.
Right, as a community cohesion work that you're doing. So that paid off.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the relationship with the police really paid off, because 18 months ago you wouldn't have said to the police, off you go. They'd have all got the riot gear out, they are trained in how to defend themselves. They would have all been out in the riot gear and they would have said, come on then, let's have some. But because the community said, we know best, listen to us, withdraw, the police did what they were told to do, asked to do, and the community stepped in and did that work that the police allowed them to do, which I think was the difference. And all that weekend, those community leaders were out and about, they were calming the situation, they were talking to friends and family of people who got involved. They were encouraging people to hand themselves in. Let's not forget that. They were actually...
Oh, were they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, they were encouraging people to hand themselves in. Some families actually took their young people who were involved to the police station on a voluntary basis. Lots and lots of meetings were had with the police in the days that followed about what the process would be. We've got some independent custody visitors that the Mayor is responsible for, one of her statutory powers, and one of our ICVs actually did a little training session for local people about what that meant for their, for any people from the community who might be arrested, what their rights were, what would happen to them in the cells, how the independent custody visitors could go and make sure that they were getting all their needs met. So everybody worked together to fill that gap between knowledge and ignorance.
I mean, obviously, the Roma community has come in, which used to previously be occupied by the Asian community. Before that, it was the African Caribbean community. How's the relationship between the Muslim community, the African Caribbean community, with the new, what we would term as maybe migrants, although they're not migrants, hopefully, in that real sense. How's that relationship developed over the last, as I say, 8 years, 10 years?
So I've got 3 members of my family live in Hare Hill, so I know Hare Hills very well. I visit Hare Hills a lot, and I am an East Leeds girl, so Hare Hills is in East Leeds. And it's a really peace-loving, settled community, and I think the resilience of that community, the lived experience of the Black Caribbean, the South Asian communities of racism when they first came in has really made them very welcoming of new communities coming in. So they are very supportive of those communities, have put an arm around those communities, and I think that's the strength of Hare Hills and places like Hare Hills, because there are other places in Leeds and wider West Yorkshire where you've got that mix of different groups coming together and living really successfully together, and that's always been the case in Hare Hills. We've never had sectarian battles or difficulties, not at all.
Right, that's good to hear. I mean, Leeds has always been welcoming to people from outside.
Absolutely.
Outside, and we know that it's got a long history of doing that. Now, obviously, this is sort of lessons to be learned, but is similar work going on in other parts of West Yorkshire? For Bradford, for example, we have a huge issue in terms of confidence between the community, particularly the South Asian community and the police at the moment. Because I think following some of the recent events in Gaza, some of the issues that have developed in Bradford, I've been told, has sort of left a lot to be desired between the police. And I was talking to one of my friends whom you know quite well as well, Sophie Bunsey, who has been on my program a number of times. And she was saying that there's some young people where they were unfortunately targeted by the right for the wrong reasons, and the police in her view, did not the best way to put it was felt slightly heavy-handed, but without having all the information, they automatically assumed that there was something serious going on. So is similar work going on in other parts of West Yorkshire as well? To try and build that strength of resilience between communities.
Yeah, so we've got the Police Race Action Plan, but before I talk about the Police Race Action Plan and all the work with communities that sits under that piece of work, I would just like to say that I hear from Jewish communities exactly the same thing as you just described.
I'm sure they do.
And West Yorkshire Police are stuck in the middle. What they're trying to do is manage multiple protests, meetings, events on a weekly basis. So we've had over 600 events that have had to be policed by police officers who have had to give up their leave, had to give up their holidays, had to work 12-hour shifts to cover these events. And the police don't want to be political and don't want to be in the middle. So the police have tried to be as even-handed as possible. And I actually met with a group of people from the Jewish faith a few weeks ago who were saying they didn't feel the police had been as supportive as they could.
We've got a phone call. Let me go to
Brilliant.
Assalamu alaikum. Good evening. Who's calling? Please, can you give me your name and where you're calling from?
Hi. Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. It's Mohammed here, calling from Penrith.
Penrith. Wow, mashallah. Very good. It's a long way away. Mohammed, thank you for... Oh, is that Mohammed who's been on my program when we did water safety for young people?
That's right. Yes, I
Oh,
am.
mashallah, yes, yes, yes. When we have had people who unfortunately lost their lives going into water. Muhammad works in the Lake District. He used to be here in Bradford. Muhammad, I hope you're enjoying the weather in the Lake District. Nice to have you on the program. I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you've had a chance to listen to what Alison had to say. So what would you like to say, sir?
I suppose one of my hi there, good evening,
Good evening.
Alison. I've actually heard you speak at Leeds at the AFTA conference a year ago.
Can you hear him?
I can't really hear.
You can't hear it here. Sorry, Mohammed. I mean, I think this system has not worked properly.
It's very echoey.
There's quite echoey there, so she can't really hear you. I can hear you in my earpiece. So he's
Yeah,
saying
so
that,
if you tell me, that'd be great.
You heard Alison speak last year, did you?
Yeah, at the AFTA conference at the Leeds Armory.
At the Leeds Armory.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So go on.
Yeah, so my question really is, the police and crime commissioners tend to invest a lot in urban areas.
Police and crime commissioners.
Rural areas like Ilkley and so on tend to get ignored, and particularly racism and Islamophobia tend to have a different impact on those communities.
Right.
And how they address those, because a lot of resources go into the urban areas like Leeds and Bradford, but then the rural areas tends to get ignored as if there's no problem there.
Okay, so talk about rural areas.
Where the community
yeah. So it might feel as though rural areas are being ignored, but obviously hate crime happens everywhere, and it's important to recognise that hate crime happens anywhere. But the person, the victim of that hate crime, has to report it. So wherever they are, whether that's urban or rural, the victim has to report, because it is definitely the case that there are less neighbourhood policing resources in rural communities than in urban areas. That is a fact. So you're less likely to just see a PCSO walking down the highway if you're in a rural part of Colne Valley, for example, than if you were in the middle of Armley in Leeds. And so the responsibility has to be on the victim to report, so that hopefully the police can give the right response. So in West Yorkshire we have dedicated hate crime teams, and they will work across the whole of West Yorkshire, be that rural, be that urban, to address the issues that have been reported. The biggest issue in dealing with hate crime is identification of the perpetrator. So I was in Wakefield some years ago, 2 years ago, with Alan Wassell, who sadly passed away, when I was called the N-word in the middle of Wakefield, next to the town hall. I remember it well. I'd never seen this young man before. He walked towards me, said the word, walked straight back. He was gone in a flash. And I didn't report that. I take responsibility for that. But even if I had reported it, the chances that I would have got justice are really slim, because I didn't know who that person was. They would have had to have been, checking that person by CCTV and all the rest of it. So I'd like to think that if someone reports to the police, that the hate crime teams who are there for all our communities would respond. And if they don't respond in West Yorkshire, then our casework team are here to listen to those victims who don't feel that they're getting the best service, and we will respond. I promise that we will respond. I can't respond in Penrith.
I was just going to say,
Cumbria, I think that's part of Cumbria.
Can you stretch your arm to Penrith? Mohammed,
well, I do know your PCC in Cumbria, and is a great guy, just being elected, and called David, and so I know that David will respond in the same way that we will respond in West Yorkshire. So please ask David.
Mohammed, obviously you live in a very rural area in the Lake District, right? You live in a very rural area, which obviously doesn't have a very large black and ethnic minority community in that area, but it does have an influx on these months. In the summer months, a lot of people sort of come in and want to visit those areas and want to see the natural beauty that the Lake District has to offer. Now, do you see a lot of transient crime or hate crime taking place in that part of the world? And one of the things I'll come back to is, Alison mentioned reporting. We know for a fact, and I sat on the Stephen Lawrence group after the Macpherson report came out, and there was quite an effort to try and drum up reporting of hate crime to the police service. And we saw all these hundreds of reporting centres established at that time, but most of them have now disappeared. How are things in your part of the world?
I think generally there is an issue and a challenge about people reporting and having confidence to report.
Right.
And this is not just in Cumbria, because I've worked in rural areas, and I work in rural areas across the country, like southwest of England, central England, and so on. And I think sometimes there's a challenge around victim services and how culturally competent and appropriate they are
that is true.
to those communities. And there is a challenge about getting the information out to those communities and people and encouraging them, giving them confidence to report, and then what the response is. And there's a lot of communities that I've had to challenge who are out on the hills, who have experienced hate crime, both in Yorkshire and elsewhere, and in Cumbria, but they feel that they don't want to report because it's not worth it. And you get and I think we know, and you know regularly, that hate crime is sort of sometimes 10 times underreported. So I think there's an issue, particularly in rural areas, to get people to come. I've worked in rural areas for the last 30 years.
Right.
So there is a huge barrier to reporting in some of those rural areas about some of those incidents,
I think
whether they're Islamophobic or racist.
I think you probably hear people in the cities as well, in urban areas, say that we don't want to report this crime because we know the police will not do anything about it anyway. Is that one of the factors that the people have less confidence that the police will take it seriously and therefore it will not go anywhere? Is that one of the factors that you think, in your opinion?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, you, Mohammed.
I think there is an element of that, yes.
Because you worked in Bradford as a hate crime, so as a third-party organisation, didn't you? A third sector organisation,
Yeah.
sort of looking at hate crime in the Bradford area, didn't you? Before you
Yes,
moved
I did.
to your salubrious mansion in the Lake District.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a luxurious mansion, but yeah.
Yeah, and you do raise a really good point, Mohammed. It is true that access to victim support services, access to police is different if you don't have confidence in those systems, but also if you don't understand the pathways into those systems. So we have got to do more work to help all our communities to understand their rights, their entitlements, as well as their obligations in this regard. So you're absolutely right. And more community development. Of course, the cuts mean that there's less community development resources nowadays, but we need to invest in more community development in both rural and urban areas so that people feel confident to report.
Mohammed, from both sides, I mean, I know you work with the fire service over there as well at the moment, and you worked in the third sector in Bradford as a hate crime advisor, a campaigner. What do you think the people like Alison and her colleagues need to do? I mean, we take into fact that over the last 14 years, the budgets for the police authorities and the police and crime commissions has been devastated. And we don't think that's going to change over the next 3 or 4 years.
No.
I mean, today we got the bad news. I mean, we're all hoping that we were hoping some good news to be coming out. But the Chancellor has made an announcement today that the budget gap is going to be absolutely over 22 billion. So there's no sort of silver lining at the moment on the horizon. But are there anything, sometimes things don't have to cost too much, do they? Are there any things that you feel that they could do that would try and change that narrative in communities?
I think for rural areas, I think there's a need to listen to some of the research that's going on. My colleagues at University Leicester are doing some research on rural racism at the moment.
Right.
And they're coming out with exactly the same research and outcomes as I found 30 years ago in terms of the isolation and the challenges communities face. So I think the commissioners need to listen to what the communities are saying and what the research is saying, and then use that as a way of investing in some of those rural communities to build confidence in this, and also working with some of the big employers where they're employed. A lot of these rural communities have a large number of health and social care workers, particularly coming from Africa at the moment.
Right.
And and they're very much under the surface, under the radar, and how are we reaching them? And they're experiencing a lot of issues which are not being addressed by the various different agencies until they come to light, which sometimes is far too late because they're experiencing racism and then keeping it quiet and just sort of thinking, oh, we'll go away and we'll just live in our castle, which is our home.
Right.
Until it gets so bad that they have to go and seek help, and then it's too late by then because they then leave those areas, and then that results in a lack of services for the local community.
And then there's health inequalities, of course. So I'd be really interested to see that research, Mohammed, and to share that with my APCC colleagues, because as you know, I lead on EDI and health and race disparities. So I don't know how we get it. Maybe I'll Google.
Who's doing the research? It's not Chris Allen, is it?
Sorry, no, it's Neil Chakrabarti and Professors Corinne Fowler and Neil Chakrabarti.
All right.
It's only 1 year in. There's 1 year left for the research. So there's another year to go.
All right. I know you're coming on my program in 2 weeks' time, aren't you, to talk about water safety?
I am, yeah.
So if you bring the details, if you can, I'll pass them on to Alison.
Well, there's a year to go in the research,
Yeah.
but it'd be interesting to hear what's going on now, so that I can share that nationally. But
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Definitely,
And
yeah.
I want
That's
to
good.
share that information with my colleagues. who I
Mohammed,
think
thank
will
you,
use it
thank
really
you
well.
very much. Inshallah,
Thank you very much.
I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time when you come and talk about water safety as well, which is really, you know, we've just seen somebody passed away last week in the Lake District, a 16-year-old young man, you know, who went there for a day and unfortunately lost his life there as well. So we can talk about that and what people need to do when they use, you know, they go into the water as well. Thank you very much. Thank you for your contribution. And like Mohammed, if anybody wants to ring in, it's 01274214299. If you want to share your thoughts, you know, we'll welcome that. Obviously, this is an opportunity for you to tell Alison any experiences that you've had, not just in West Yorkshire, but across the country as well. Because as she says, she also is the lead on the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, and I'm sure, you know, she would want to hear your thoughts, your ideas, any concerns, and maybe share them not only within West Yorkshire with her colleagues, but also nationally as well. Now, obviously, we had a good chance to talk about that. Now, one of the big stories going on at the moment is what happened in Greater Manchester, at the Manchester Airport. Now, I know it's got nothing to do with you, and you know, I know it's got nothing to do with you. It's not in your area, but obviously, as a PCC, and we know Andy Burnham has consistently said to people, let's wait till we see the whole picture and then start making judgments, obviously. And over the days, a number of footages emerged, you know, and I got to know a lot of things well beforehand because, you know, people are sort of feeding me some of the information. But obviously, I can share that with people. Now, obviously, regardless of what the backstory is, the actual incident of stamping and kicking somebody on the floor is something that is horrendous and totally out of inappropriate and totally unacceptable behavior. So when we come back, inshallah, we'll talk about some of those issues, because obviously there are issues. And I've been told that, you know, people in the Manchester Force area, Greater Manchester Force area, have actually lost their confidence in the GMP, Greater Manchester Police, because it's seen as, the week before that was that issue about women and girls and how the force was had been treating women and girls who were coming into custody.
Yeah, the Dame Vera Baird report.
The Dame Vera Baird report. And then in the past, there's been some issues around how the GMP had policed Palestinian protest marches as well. Again, they were seen as going in heavy-handed. And again, you know, there's some issues around that. So there's a huge issue for Andy Burnham, for whom I have a lot of respect. Let me put it that way. You know, I have a lot of respect for Andy, that he has to face in his position as the Police and Crime Commissioner. Although his deputy, like you, has been on TV, and we're talking about it. But before we move forward, your immediate views when you saw that police officer kicking that young man who was lying on the floor, like, were you horrified like most people were, except from, you know, people like one of the Reform members of Parliament who made some extremely derogatory remarks in the opinion of many,
Lee Anderson.
Lee Anderson, yeah, we'll name him. So I mean, we've got 48 seconds, so we'll have to come back to that. I mean, as I say, these are serious issues, a lot of talk going on, a lot of misinformation going on, a lot of social media traffic, which is sort of fevering and hate as well. So this issue I really want to talk to Alison about, the second part of the third part of my program. If you have any thoughts, share with them with us, 01274 214 299. don't go away. As I said, we've extended this program today to talk about some of these issues as we face all these challenges in our community. We know what's been happening since Gaza, all around the country as well. And as Alison says, a lot of police resources have gone into this area in West Yorkshire to try and keep those protest marches safe and well and allow people to protest peacefully. We'll see you back soon. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.